All right, hey everybody. Thanks for joining us for the webinar. We'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully people will start trickling in um, as we go along. Um, my name is Holly Bonar. I am a technical application specialist with De Novo Software. Today we're going to be talking about the new release of FCS Express IVD. It's the 7.24 version. This update includes a good number of bug fixes and enhancements. So we're going to show you as many of these as we can in the next hour or so, and then point out some things that clinical and GXP laboratories might find useful. If you're not in a clinical or a GXP lab, or you are in a GXP lab and you're using RUO and you just found your way here, that's no problem. Everything I'm going to show you today is in both the RUO and the IVD version, and they're all accessible by everybody. We really just wanted to put together some of those features that we know will be of interest to you guys and help make your analyses a lot quicker and more efficient. As you go along, please feel free to put some questions into the question box. My colleague Greg Veltri is here with me, and he'll answer those questions as we go along. If we have time at the end, we can also answer some more questions there. Okay. So it's been about a year and a half since 7.18 came out, since we've had our last release. And since that time, we've had a lot of bug fixes and a lot of enhancements. There have been over 200 bug fixes and 135 new enhancements added to 7.24. So that's quite a bit. I have an overview here on this slide that just shows some of those enhancements that have been added. They range from a few big ticket items to brand new functionality, all the way down to small items that hopefully will make life a little bit easier when you're analyzing your data. We're not going to be able to go through all of them, but we'll hit the highlights and try to focus on some things that will be of most interest to the clinical and GXP laboratories. As we go through, I've highlighted some features that many clinical and GXP laboratories have either requested to be added, or we've noticed that these are the things people ask us help with and how to make things easier. So we've tried to add functionality that can really help out with that. So these items in green are things that I think you'll particularly be interested in. We do have some big changes, and we'll talk about the biggest one, which is the addition of quadrant gates, how they work, how your old layouts will handle the change. So we'll spend a good amount of time on that. Specifically for clinical and GXP labs, we've also added a brand new token report to help with validation. This is something that's going to generate a report of all of the statistics and tokens and calculations that you've put into your layouts. This is something in the past that did not have functionality for at all, so it was a very manual procedure. And as somebody who used to do layout validations for CAP purposes, for me, this might be the most exciting thing and the coolest thing that we'll talk about today. So I'm really excited to show that to people. Something else that people have asked for, or at least expressed trouble with managing, is that we've also added the ability for administrators to push user settings to other users on their license. This is for our labs who are using the security feature and they have administrators that are running the license. So I'll show you how that works. We're hoping that this is something that can be added to non-security users, but for now it's available to our security users. For statistics, we've added a warning to our plots to show events, the percentage of events that are off scale or out of the plot, just to give people an idea that there's something going on outside the plot and make sure they realize that there's events there. We've also added the ability to batch export the whole entire contents of an integrated spreadsheet. So this is definitely something that validated laboratories have asked us about. They often use spreadsheets in their layouts. And we had already had the ability to export those spreadsheets one at a time, but now we can do it as part of our batch processing so that we can do export integrated spreadsheets for all of the iterations, which will be a huge improvement. we're always trying to increase the speed and performance of FCS Express. You know, as people's layouts get more complicated, as data files get bigger, it's always important to keep working on this and make improvements here. So one of the things that we've done that I think is going to be a huge difference is we've optimized data loading using local caching for network files. And it's like, what does that mean? So if you've noticed when you first load your layouts, there's that initial lag when you're populating your data, your layouts with your data files. That lag or any sort of lag when you're moving from file to file, a lot of times that can be from those data files being on your network and needing to be moved to your local computer in order to analyze them. So now we're going to cache those on the local computer where you're working. And so because of that, we won't have to go back and forth to the network as often to pull those data files. So you should be able to see that things are much faster, and it should be a visible improvement from where you were before. So this is actually really cool and has been a long time coming. We've also made quite a few usability and appearance enhancements. You know, usability is kind of an odd word. You know, what does that mean? And so what it means is we wanted to add things that make it easier to do your analysis or to use the software. So a lot of these things are really small things, small, quick and easy things that maybe help remove an extra click to do something, or maybe you'll find a tool a little bit easier. So just the little tiny things that overall combined can really make things a little bit more efficient. The bigger item here is that now we have sliders directly on the plot in order to adjust scaling. So for example, if you're looking at my exponential data and you want to look at the below 0 parameter, you used to have to click on the plot and go to the format window, and there was a slider there. But now there'll be sliders directly in the plot so you can adjust them on the go as you're going along. So those are pretty cool too. We've also updated the appearance of the default appearance of plots. So if you remember, for a long, long time, we always had plots that had red borders around them. There was borders around titles. We've completely updated those plots to look a little bit more like what we see in other places. And hopefully things will look the way everybody likes them. Okay. So for our big ticket items, we do now have the ability to export directly to Luma or to GraphPad Prism. I'm not going to spend any time talking about these, just mostly in the interest of time. We do have some videos on our website about how to do exports to Prism. So if that's something you use in your laboratory and you're interested in learning how to do it, feel free to check out those videos, or you can also reach out to us at support@denovosoftware.com if you want to get it like an in-person tutorial or ask any questions about how to do that. The big ticket item that we are going to talk about are quadrant gates. So we've completely overhauled how quadrant work in FCS Express. So all quadrants are now gates by default. So you'll no longer have to convert a quad to a gate if you want to use it as a gate in your layout. So everything will show up in the hierarchy. Those gates will already be assigned, and then you can use them exactly the same way that you would normally use a gate. So we'll also talk about your current layouts that were built before this functionality was available. So FCS Express is always backwards compatible, meaning that you can always open your old layouts in a new version, but not the other way around. So you will definitely be able to open your old layouts if you update to 7.24. So we're going to open an older layout, show you what things look like, and how to manage the quads that were created before this functionality was available. Okay. So let's go ahead and open the software. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So we just have some basic plots and a basic layout here. We're going to take a look at quadrants if we had created a layout in 724. So if this was a brand new layout that we created today with the new version, this is what quadrants would look like. So we just have some basic plots here. We're looking at a TBNK file, gating on cells, and then lymphocytes, our CD3 positive population, and then we've gated CD4 and CD8. We have our hierarchy over here in the gate navigator. You could also show this in a gate view if that's how you like to look at your, if you like to look at your gates. It works exactly the same way using a gate view. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is let's just draw some quads. Okay. So we've got two plots here. One's gated on CD4. One is gated on CD8. And we're going to add quads exactly the same way we would have in an older version. We'll go to the gating tab, choose quadrants, and then come down here and drop them on the plot. What's different is that now that quadrants are gates, they're going to behave like gates. And so if you were to draw a new gate onto a plot, you would have a window pop up asking you to name the gate and perhaps change the color. So the same thing is going to happen when you add a new quadrant. It's going to ask you if you want to create new quads or if you want to replace existing quads. When you create the new quads, by default, it will create them hierarchically on the layout. And so what that means is that whatever gate this plot was on when you created the quads, that will be the parent gate of your quadrant gates. So they will be created in the correct place of the hierarchy of your gating strategy, right? And it will also give you, it will show you what that parent gate is. So this one was gated on our CD4 population, so we see it here in the dropdown. I would say most of the time, this is what users are going to do when they create a new gate. They want it to be in the correct place of the hierarchy, so that we do that by default for quads. If you did not want them to be part of the hierarchy, you could certainly uncheck this here. You could also change, if you wanted it to be a different parent, you could certainly do that. I'll point out, you can use the dropdown to pick a different parent if you want. I'll also point out, this is one tiny little new thing that's also in this version. When you choose some dropdowns for certain gate selections, you'll see that now the gates show up as the hierarchy rather than just a big long list of gates. And so it's just to try to help you make it easier to find the gate that you're looking for. Not all gate dropdowns are like this. We're adding them and updating them as we go along, but here's one spot where you can see that it's really easy to find the gate that you might want to change this to. But we're gonna leave it as it's set default so that we'll create those quadrants hierarchically. You're also going to have the opportunity to name these quadrant gates. And so when you're creating quads in FCS Express, what you're really creating is a quadrant set, which is the 4 quad gates all together. And so we're going to name the quadrant set, and then we're going to name the individual quadrant gates. The quadrant set by default is just going to be prefixed by a Q1, and then it will just number sequentially. So the first set of quads that you build will be Q1, the next one will be Q2, and so on. You can definitely change this name if you want. If there's something else that is more meaningful to you, feel free to do that. You can also just leave it as default, and that works too. It's also going to use your current X and Y axis labels as the names of the quads. So we are creating quads on this plot here. We have CD27 and CD127 on our X and Y axis. So it's pulled those two names and listed them here. So in this case, we're only showing the antibody, and that's because I'm only showing the antibody on my plots. So there, if you remember, your X and Y axis labels are either pulled from the name or the stain keyword, and you can control whether it pulls both of those or one of those in your FCS Express user options. So whatever those user options are set to show on your X and Y axis, that's what's going to be pulled here to name your quadrants. As I said, all 3 of these things are completely modifiable. You can leave them as they are, or you can change them up to whatever you want them to be. Whatever they are, you will see them here. It's giving you an example of what the names of these things might look like based on what you've put here. So the name of the quad set is going to be Q1, CD127 versus CD27. And then each of the quads will be named accordingly with the pluses and the minuses to show positivity. And the first one will start in the upper left, and it'll go around the circle and name them all. So if we decided we wanted to name something else, so maybe we wanted the fluorochrome to be here for this one, you'll see that we added this extra information here, and it added it to the names. Or the converse is true if you're showing both the antibody and the fluorochrome on your plots, and it shows it here automatically, and you don't want that information, you may want to come here and delete it. So whatever names you want to give it, whatever works for you is fine here. So we're going to hit OK. And it's going to create our quads. You'll notice on the plot that it looks exactly the same as the previous quads did, right? So you come here and you move it. These percentages all show up in generally the same spot. What is different is that it shows up in the hierarchy now. So CD4 was our parent gate. We see our quad set name here, Q1, CD127 versus CD27. And then it's expanded into the 4 quads that are automatically assigned colors. So we start here and go around the corner with the red, blue, purple, and green. You can collapse it if you want to, if you don't want to see all of those there. Or you can leave it open so that you can use those gates to do something else. So as I said, quadrants are now gates, and they're gates just like regular gates. So they behave just like regular gates do. So if we were to change the parameter of this plot to something else, you'll see that the quadrants disappear. And that's because quadrants are gates, and gates are defined by the parameters that were on the plot when we drew the gate or the quads, right? So if we wanted some quads here for this combination, we would come up to the quads and draw a new set of quads. We would also have the ability to name it exactly the same way we did. Our quad set would now be Q2 because it's the second quad set that we're adding here, and we'd hit OK. So now we have our new quads here, and they show up in the hierarchy exactly under the CD4 gate. Okay, if we change this back to our CD127, our other quads pop back up because these quads are specific to these parameters. Okay, this is exactly the same thing that happens with a regular gate on a plot. If we don't want those quads anymore, we can simply come back to our hierarchy and delete them. It's going to ask, or it's going to let you know that if we delete that quad set, it's going to delete the other quad, the actual quad gates that are underneath of it, and just verify that we actually want to do that. So we'll hit yes, and it disappears. Okay. If we want to show these colors, so we automatically assigned red, blue, purple, and green. If we want to do some backgating and we actually want to show the different colors of the different quad gates, we can certainly do that. We can do that by clicking on the plot and going to either Format, Gates to Display, or if you have your formatting window over here docked, which I usually recommend if you're building layouts, it's really handy to have this on the side of your screen while you're doing these things. You can use the drop down to go to Gates to Display. So this is where you would normally go to either turn off or turn on a color of a gate on a particular plot. And so by default, all gates are chosen, but you can see we're not showing the colors for our quad plots. And that's because we have a setting down here that says allow quads and quad gates to be displayed, and it's turned off. The reason why we have it turned off is that you can imagine that you may have lots of plots that have quads on them. And if we showed all 4 colors for all those quads for every plot in a layout, that could get to be a muddied mess pretty quickly. So we turn the quad gates off by default. And then if you want to show one on a quad, you can do that by coming over here. So we would check this, and you can see we're showing all the gates now. So we see the red, blue, green, and there's a few purple down here. If we switch our parameters, so we'll go to 127 here and 25 here, you'll see that the colors change accordingly. So they will move, they're just like gates, they will update as needed. Turn these back. Oh, wrong one. 127. There we go. And so now we have those parameters back and our quads pop back up. Um, so one of the things we can look at, it's a little bit different now, is the formatting of quads. So you may remember previously that if you wanted to format the properties of a quad, if you went up to the formatting tab, there was a quadrant button up here where you could go into that. That button is no longer here. It's been replaced by a button that says selected gate or quads. So this button, you can use this to format any gates or the quadrants that are on any single plot. So you would simply click on the gate or the quad and then go to the selected gate or quads button or choose it from the formatting menu over here. And then we're going to see all of the information about that particular set of quads. It's going to give you the hierarchy, all the parent and grandparent gates of it up here, the name of it, the color of the lines, the line width. These are things that you can change here if you want to. It's also going to give you the center point coordinates of the vertice here. So if we move this, you'll see those numbers update to where they're actually sitting on the plot. There is a new button here that says set center point as percentile. So if we click on this, it will let you set it to, let's say 80% on the x-axis and maybe 15% on the y. And we hit OK. And then it will automatically move those to the percentiles that you designated. It's also going to lock them automatically because you set that center point somewhere, so you don't want to be able to move it. But you can unlock it just by unchecking these guys, and then you're free to move it wherever else you want it to go. This is where you would come to turn this into a floating quadrant. So for anybody who's doing things like kappa lambda ratios, that's where they're frequently popular, or any other plot where you want a floating quadrant. Just check the box. And then you'll wind up with all 5 vertices that you can move accordingly. Okay. If you wanted to, you could specify the angles here, but I would say most people are probably just moving the vertices. So we know a big question that will come up is, how do I link a gate or link a quad and have 2 quads that are linked to each other so that they will move as one. We do that completely differently as well because we're no longer having to convert quads to gates. They're already gates. So I'm going to put another quad on this plot over here. And we have our new quad set coming up, and we'll just keep our names the same. So now we have a quad set under our CD4 gate, and we have another quad set under our CD8 gate. And these are the same parameters, and they're 2 different populations. So let's say we want to link these 2 so that the gate placements of the quads are the same. So the way we would do that is to, it's within the properties of the quadrants. So we're going to go back to the selected gate or quadrants property window, and you'll see a collapsed section called linked quadrants. We're going to expand that up. There's a box here. So we're just going to click link, and it's going to give us an option to choose the plot that has the quads on it that we want to link it to. It's very similar to what you would see in the statistics box, where when you're editing a statistics box and you see the little thumbnails of your quads here. So any plot that has quadrants on it will be listed here. And when you select it, you'll see the quad, you'll see the picture, so you know you're picking the right one. If you have a bunch of them here and you have no idea which one you want, you can also do this by selecting the quad set from a tree. So it's going to give you your hierarchy here and show where the quads are, and it'll help you choose them that way. So that way it might be easier to know where they are in your hierarchy. So I'm going to choose these quads here. And you'll see now that they're linked, they have the same placement. And then when we move one, the other one moves along with it. The nice thing about this is that these are linked to each other in both directions. You can move either of these quads and they will both move. If you remember in older versions, when you linked a quad, one of them you could move and the other one was completely locked down and you couldn't make the movements from this plot. You would have to do it from another plot. So now you can do it from either side. If you do have an instance where you want, say, these quads to be locked down and you only want the movements of these quads to determine these guys, you can do that by going into the properties of this quadrant and going to gate edit. And if you make it false, it will make it so that you can move these quads, but you cannot move these quads. So if you click on this and you try to move them, you'll get a box that says you're not allowed to edit. So if you're using this for something like a stained and an unstained control, negative control, positive control thing, you can still have that functionality if you want. But we've also had people ask to be able to go in both directions, and now you can do that. Okay. If you have linked quads and you want to break the link, you can do it a couple different ways. You could go back to those property of the quads, click on the links that are showing here and just click the unlink button and it will break the link that way. You can also do it from your hierarchy. So like when you link gates, if you have linked quads and you click on them, you'll see the little icon that indicates that they're linked and which quads are linked to each other. And if you right click on it, you'll have an option to break the link and it will make sure that you really want to do that, and then it will break. So it's pretty easy to kind of navigate around the quads that way. Okay, so what does this look like with your old layout? This is pretty straightforward with all the new defaults and with the new created in the new version, but what does it look like with your old layouts? So I'm going to close this and we're going to open a new or an existing layout that was created in 718. So let's go to this guy. We'll open this up. So the first thing you're going to see when you open a layout is this quadrant options box. And all this is some information about the change that we've made. And it's just going to tell you that we recreated this layout in an older version, and now quadrants are gates. There is a link here that will take you directly to our website. It has more information about quads as gates and why we made the change, and some more information to kind of help you figure out whether you want to use those defaults with your old layout or not. But we can choose that here. And basically that's what this is. So don't get overwhelmed by what's listed here. You're basically going to have two options. You can either open your layout using all the new defaults that we just went through, right? So the quadrant gates will behave like conventional gates, meaning that they will be children of the gate that was on the plot when you created them. That will be its parent. You'll be able to see them in the gate views. When you change the parameters, the quads will disappear and you'll either need to create new ones or put the old ones back on. You'll be able to name gates, quad gates, when you create a quad. And you don't need to convert them to anything in order to use them as a gate because they're already a gate. The other option is if you liked things the way they were in your old version of FCS Express, you can choose to have those quads behave more like they did in the old version. So what that means is that the quadrant gates will not be in the gate views or the gate navigator. You can change the parameters and the quads will stay there. You won't have to name anything. When you put a quad on a plot, the quad will just go on a plot. So two options. Do you want to use new defaults or do you want it to look more like it did in the past? If you click the little arrow here, you'll see that we have the quadrant options listed here. So these are the options that are in the FCS Express user options. And you'll see that when we click one or the other, these options change. So this is what you're actually doing when you select one of these two. You're changing your user options. And it's okay to pick one of these because you can always go back and change them. You can always come back and reopen the layout and choose something different. So I would recommend, kind of reading through these, kind of deciding which of these applies to you and then choosing that option and seeing how it goes. You can also customize these quadrant options, whereas if you click this one, then you can come here and kind of check what you want or what you don't want. I would recommend going with one of these two first, and maybe experimenting with both of them to kind of see which one works better for you. And then if you want to customize things, absolutely feel free to do that. So we're going to open this layout first using the new default so we can kind of take a look at what that would look like. So I'm going to hit OK. The layout's going to open. And so this is just kind of a basic immunophenotyping layout. We're looking at singlets, viable cells, lymphs, monos, grands. We have some gating on our myeloid cells. And then we're looking at B cells, kappa lambda, and NK cells and T cells, 4 and 8, things like that. So, you know, very basic peripheral blood immunophenotyping analysis. We do have a number of quads here already built. So you'll see if you come over to your gate navigator, those quads show up in your hierarchy where you would expect them to be. And actually we can expand this guy so you can see all the quad plots, gates. What is a little bit different, these quads are named kind of differently than what they were if you had created them in 724 from the beginning. Mostly that's because these quads were actually created before that naming convention was put into the software. So it really just kind of gave it a generic name based on the plot name or the plot number. So plot 17, plot 14, and then it just tells you whether it's the upper, lower, right, which quad it is. But they all function exactly the same way. So if you wanted to gate a plot on one of these gates, you would simply drag and drop it on top of the plot. Everything shows up hierarchically. If we change a parameter, the quads disappear, just like we saw in the previous layout. One thing I did want to point out, in this layout, we had a converted quad. So we needed to have a quad as a gate back in our old layout, which we would have had to convert manually. So that was already present, and you'll see that it actually shows up just as a regular gate in your hierarchy. So that the fact that that was turned into a gate is still maintained. It is simply linked to the actual quad that is there now. And anything that you use that for in the layout, whether you're using it to generate statistics or if you're using it to downstream in the rest of your hierarchy, it will function exactly the same as it did. Okay. So let's close this again and let's reopen it. So as long as we don't save it, it's still an old layout. So if we open it again, the quadrant options are going to pop up again. So this time let's use the behave more like previous versions of FCS Express. And we'll hit OK. Okay. And then it opens back up. The first thing you can see over here in the hierarchy is that there are no quads here. You can't see them. They're all hidden. Our converted quad is still here, just as it was in the old layout. It does have the little crosshairs on it, so we know that it's a quadrant gate that was converted over, but the gate was already here, so that's why it's listed appropriately in our hierarchy. Again, the statistics, anything you were using that for remains intact. If we come and change our parameters, you'll see that the quads stay exactly where they're at. If we come up to the gating tab and add another quadrant on here, they just move. We're not prompted to create a new set of quads or anything like that. So as is, this functions very, very similarly to the way it functioned in the old version. It's important to note that the gates are there. Quadrants are gates, whether you choose the new default or the old style method. Quadrants are gates. The difference is that for this particular set of options, they are here, but they are hidden and we've turned them off. So if you want to see them in your gate navigator, you can right click on the gate navigator. You can also do this on the gate view. It works exactly the same. Go to format, and then you'll see some gate display options here. You can see we have an option here that says allow quads and quad gates to be displayed. It is unchecked because that's one of the options that we chose. And if we turn that on and hit OK, you'll see our quads show up. They do look a little different though. This quad is the one we created here. So it's a brand new quad. And then you'll have this group here that says migrated quads. And so all the quads in this layout were pulled out of the hierarchy. So they're all sitting gated on all of the events. And they're all kind of listed here. That way, so you can look at them, you can not look at them, you can keep them hidden. It's the fact that they're pulled out of the hierarchy that allows us to change the parameters without the quads going away, or it allows us to add quadrants without having to name them. It's because we are simply showing, because they're outside the hierarchy, we're simply showing the percent gated of whatever is on the plot, whether that's a parameter change or a quadrant change. So if this more appeals to you, or if it's part of your analysis strategy to come in and change at your axes frequently in order to do your analysis, or change your quadrants. Keep hitting things. There we go. Or change your quadrants a lot. These options might be a better fit for you. You'll just need to remember that if you do want to use one of your quads as a gate, just make sure it's in the right place in the hierarchy. So you can either come here, move it to, if it's gated on the B cells, make sure that it's gated under here, or you can always create one and make sure that it's hierarchically correct. Okay, I think this would be a good option for people who usually don't make a lot of, or did not convert a lot of quads in the past, or they're used to changing things around on their parameters a lot. If you used a lot of quadrants in the past, or converted a lot of quadrants in the past, and you're not going to change axes and things like that, then the new defaults might work for you. The point is that you totally have the choice of which way you want to go. Okay. And if you don't like what you see, you can go back and change them again. So I would encourage you to try both out and see which one fits best for you. One thing to note, that open options box is going to show up every time you open a new layout. If you don't want that to show up anymore, there was the do not show there at the bottom, or you could resave this layout in this version, and it will become a 724 layout, and that way that box won't pop open anymore. Just be careful if you're doing testing between the two versions, because if you save it in 724, you will not be able to open it in an older version of the software. Okay, so let's close this. And okay, so let's talk about some of the other enhancements and features. So we'll start with those features that I think clinical and validated labs might find most helpful. I think these are really cool, and I've been really excited to show this to our clinical and validated laboratories, because all of these are features that, I'm just going to open a layout here while we're getting started. These are all features that people have been asking for a while, and we were finally able to kind of get them all in this one release. So it's really cool. So the first thing I wanted to show are the slider bars that you can use to adjust scaling. So if we take a look at this plot down here, we can see that we're looking at this on a bi-exponential scale, and you know that there is a below 0 point here that can be adjusted. If your plots are set to automatic, which they normally are by default, FCS Express will set this value for you, and it usually does a pretty good job, but sometimes it needs to be adjusted. So normally to adjust these, or to adjust any other scaling settings, you would come to the plot, go to Format, Axes, and then change the scaling here. You could uncheck this, choose Use the Value, and then use the scaler to move it up and down to change that setting. But we put these slider bars directly in the plot so that you can now just adjust it straight from the plot without having to come over here and do that. So we right-click on the plot, choose Show Axis Scale Adjustment Sliders. And when we do that, we'll see that these blue little ticks pop up on your X and Y axis. And then you can just take this and move it back and forth and adjust that below 0 point. If you're kind of watching as I do this, change it to this guy, you'll see that that slider over there moves as I'm moving this slider. So it's doing the same function as what's over here. It's just allowing you to do it in the plot itself. If we click out of the edit state of the box, it goes away. So the slider bars won't show up if you print this to PDF or if you run your batch actions. And then they will pop back in when you enter the plot again. So I think these are super cool and hopefully will save just a little bit of time, but it may add up over time being able to change those settings directly in the plot. Okay. The next thing I'll show you is exporting your internal spreadsheets via batch actions. So we actually have a spreadsheet here. It's hidden. I have the headers and grid lines turned off so that we can actually use it as a visual table here. But if I click into it, and I always like to show this because I think not a lot of people realize this. If you click on a spreadsheet and you go to layout, there's this option here to turn the grid lines or headers on and off. So if they're turned on, you can see the standard spreadsheet visual here where we have A, B, C, D and all the rows, and it looks just like a spreadsheet. You could certainly leave it like this and either leave it showing in your layout or hide it so that it's not showing at all. But you can also use it as a table by turning those off, changing the shading and making this look really pretty. And then it becomes a table. So, but we do have a lot of statistics here, and we've had the request for having to be able to export this spreadsheet out to Excel. We already had the ability to export this one at a time as a one-off. So if we go to the layout tab, we'll see this button here that says export. You would export this out and it would become an Excel file. But we've had the request that people want to be able to do this for all of their iterations. And to use this button, you would have to export, go to the next one, export again, and go to the next one, which would be pretty tedious and in a lot of cases just not doable. So we added it as part of our batch processes. So if we open our batch actions, we can see there's an extra action here that says save spreadsheet to Excel. We can do this a couple different ways. We can save the output as each iteration separately. So if we wanted a separate Excel file for each of our iterations, so we have 9 iterations here, so we would wind up with 9 Excel spreadsheets, which maybe we want. Or we can combine them all into a single file and have each one of those spreadsheets be a different tab in the file. So we're going to do that. We'll save it here. We'll open it after saving. If we come to worksheet options, we can choose what the name of our tab, what the tabs are going to look like. We can use a token to make this named whatever we want. So I'm actually going to add a keyword token for our patient name. That's down here. Here we go. Okay. So now we'll have a different tab for each of our spreadsheets. I'm going to hit OK. Oh, we do need to select the spreadsheet that needs to export. So let's correct that. That's found under data source. So you'll have a list of all the spreadsheets in your layout. And then you choose the one that you want to export, which would be this one. And then we'll hit OK. Right? You could add all of any other actions that you want as part of your batch actions. You would just add this in there. And then when we're ready to go, we would run the batch. And so it's going to go through all of our iterations, 1 through 9. It's going to open up. And so now you can see that we have that table here with all of our statistics. If we click on a cell, you'll see that the formulas came over with it. So it's not just the numbers that are there. We do actually have the formulas. And each of those tabs is the spreadsheet from each of our iterations. So if we didn't want an Excel spreadsheet individually for all of these guys, we could put them into a single spreadsheet like this. Hopefully that will save people a lot of time. Okay. And then my final big ticket, I think it's a big ticket item. It's my favorite thing that we've added to the software is the token report. So a lot of times in clinical and validated laboratories, once we create a layout, we need to check and validate that we've done these calculations correctly. Did we calculate our CD4, CD8 ratio appropriately? Is that custom token that we built, was it built correctly? Things like that. And this used to be, we would have to document this, that it was checked, it was verified, and then provide it for either, a CAP inspection or whatever, wherever you're being audited. And prior to now, there was no other way to do this other than it being an incredibly manual procedure. So I remember coming in and having to copy and paste formulas into an Excel spreadsheet and trying to come up with some sort of document that would work for validation purposes. So now there's a whole tool that will help us do that. If we go to the Tools tab, there's a button here that says Token under Reports. So if we click this, it's going to give us a list of every token in this layout. And it's going to be from whatever custom tokens we've created, like the lymphosome down here. If we've got a statistic in the spreadsheet, it will be here as well. If we just have basic percent gated spreadsheets, they will be here as well. So if we scroll down, we'll see all of those by the name, the details, what page they're on, and the source description. So it will tell you what text box it comes from, what spreadsheet cell it comes from, things like that, even right down to keywords. Okay, so you can export this either to PDF or Excel or even to a text file. We can go ahead and export these really quick so we can take a look at it. Okay. It pops up pretty quick. So here's our tokens report. It just simply lists all of those things here as a PDF with the date and time and who exported it. I personally like the Excel spreadsheet only because it gives you an Excel here, and you could add extra columns where somebody comes in and signs off on it or puts a little checkbox or initials it or whatever you want to put together for your validation. So I think this is really cool. I think it could be really helpful and save folks a lot of time. Okay, so we'll close this. Next, we will go through some of those usability and appearance changes that we've added. So these are all kind of small little things that hopefully will save you some time and make things a little bit easier for you. We'll see how many of these I can get through in the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm just going to open a straight up new layout for this. There we go. And one thing you'll notice quickly is that on a blank page, we see some what we call ghost text here. The goal of this is to make it easier for brand new people to be able to come in here and say, okay, what do I need to do in order to get started? So it's simply going to tell you to drag a sample here, or you can select a plot type from up here and draw it on the page. You'll also notice that our default tab is now the Insert tab instead of the Home tab. That's because most of the time the first thing you're going to be doing is inserting something. So we wanted to make that a little bit easier. You'll also see that the tab and ribbons have been reorganized a little bit. We did not make major changes, so don't worry about that. Just kind of moved a few things around so that they might be a little bit easier for people to find. One of the things I noticed immediately, I'm a big spreadsheet user, so the spreadsheet button used to be over here on the Insert tab. It's now been moved down here, so it's together with charts because it kind of makes sense that those two are together. This one was the hardest thing for me to get used to, but it makes sense. And I got used to it pretty quickly. We've also reorganized the batch and export tab. This is probably the biggest change that we made to the ribbon. You may have noticed it in the previous layout. If you remember from before, this tab was originally just said batch, and it had all of the actions that you needed in order to run a batch action. So the actions and reports, the lightning bolts, all of that. But if you wanted to export out to PDF or PowerPoint as a one-off, say like I just have this page, I want to make a PDF out of it. In order to do that, you originally had to go to File. There was an option here to choose Export, and then you would choose whether you wanted to export a PDF or a PowerPoint. So since what we're doing here is actually exporting, whether we're doing it as a single export or as a batch, that's the action we're doing. So we kind of wanted to put all of those things together. So in general, if you need to export something, you come to the batch and export tab. And so you can either do it singly or you can do it as a batch. This button is kind of named a little bit. It's actions and reports, but it's exactly the same thing. So all of these things are here. And again, if you have an old layout, all of your batch actions will be intact as they were. Okay. One other small change is under the Tools tab. If you're an SOP user or a permission rules user, we did move those over from Quality to the Tools tab, mostly in an effort to just put all of the tools in one place. So they're here now. The token the new token report is here as well. Okay. All right. So we'll do what the ghost text says, and we'll bring in a data file. Okay. So I'm just going to drag and drop this into the plot. And it's going to ask me to insert a plot. So I'm just going to insert a histogram and a density plot. And so we can immediately see that these plots look very different than what they used to look like. Put some stuff on here, change this. You'll see that the borders are gone, the border around the text, the title is gone. We've closed the frames, made everything black. So this is maybe a little bit more of a standard, maybe what you're used to seeing as a default plot. For our histograms, the histograms are now filled by default, just to kind of make them a little bit more visual. Of course, you can change these to whatever you want. If you have a current installation of FCS Express and you update to 724, you will not immediately get these added to your defaults. That's because we never tell people that they have to update or that they have to change their defaults, because I know a lot of clinical laboratories and validated laboratories have their user options set very specifically to what they need them to be. And so we would never want a new version to come in and up in that Apple cart and change everything for you. So if you did want to change your defaults, you could do so by coming to the File tab, choosing System, and under Restore Options, there's an option to restore the default. If you do that, it will revert it back to all of the default options that come with FCS Express, not just the plot aesthetic. So keep that in mind. If you don't want to restore everything back to the beginning, but you do want the new plot aesthetic, you can actually choose that in the options. If we go to the user options under plots, you can choose a plot theme. And so if we use the dropdown, the older plot themes are listed here. This is the one that was in the previous version, 718. If you want the new ones, you could change this to FCS Express 7 default. So this will give you the new plot aesthetic without changing anything else in your options. I always tell people, make sure you check about your policy for changing your user options. I know a lot of clinical labs, a lot of validated labs have very specific options. So you're going to want to check to make sure if you can change your user options or if that's okay without making a mess of things. If you have security, you may not even be able to change these options depending on how your security is set up. So these things may need to be done by an administrator, which lends me to show one of the last bigger things that we were added was the ability for admins to push specific user settings to their other users. So let's say you have different settings that you want added to your user options and you want those to go to all of the users. So now an admin can make those changes to their own user options and then come to File, Security, User Administration, pull the list of all the people on your license. And now there's a button here that says Set Selected User Options as Default. So let's say my user options are the ones that everybody else in the lab needs to have so that we're all using the same one. I can click Me, set this as the default, and then when everybody resets their user items to the default settings, it will go to my settings and not the FCS Express default settings. So that can be a little bit easier way for to get the users to those custom settings so that they all match each other. Okay, but as I said, check with your lab to see what the rules are about changing those settings. Okay, really quickly in the last 5 minutes, let's draw a few gates on here. We're gonna add a gate. One thing that we've added is now there's hints coming. We only have one hint right now, and it's telling you how to drag this gate into the white space in order to create another plot. Again, this is just an effort to try to make it a little bit easier for brand new users to kind of know how to move forward. This is the only hint right now, but I anticipate we'll be adding other hints. You can certainly turn it off. If you don't want to see it again, hit the checkbox. There's also an option in the user options to turn it off completely. If you're an old user of FCS Express like I am, and you've been using it for a long time and you don't need these types of tips, you can certainly turn those off. Okay. So I'm going to drag this here. I'm just going to create a hierarchy really quick. Okay. Escape to. Okay. So we have a plots and we have our particular hierarchy. So we do know that changing the gates on the plots, we can either do that by dragging and dropping a gate on top of something, or just down here, or we can come over to the gate hierarchy, drag and drop it on top of this plot, or we can come up to the gating tab and use the drop down in order to choose a gate. But now we've also made it so you can just click on the title and change the gate to whatever you want. And it shows up as a hierarchy and within the context of its hierarchy, so that you can find your gate easier. So this is one of those little things where it will be a little bit faster to change gates, and hopefully over time it will help make some difference. You can see over here we've added radio buttons to the iterations. So you can click on the little buttons as well as the blue number to change things. This is because a lot of times people didn't realize that the easiest way to move from one iteration to the other is to click on these blue numbers. So we wanted to make it a little bit more intuitive by adding these radio buttons. So you think, oh yeah, I need to just click that button. And lastly, this is another one of my teeny tiny favorite things that I did not realize took as much time away from me, but actually did, was now if you change the color of a gate, it will also change the text box color. So if I double click here and I really needed this to say lymphs and I wanted it to be blue, I hit OK. So not only does the gate name change, but this text box changes to match the gate that we are here. So I always had to highlight this and go to the text box and change or the text tab and change the color. Kind of a super annoying extra step, and now that step has been eliminated. Okay. All right. So I think that's about all we have time for today, unfortunately. We saw from the first slide, there's a ton more things. So I encourage you to try it out and test the new update before you make the jump. We can always make a test license available to you so that you can have your current installation and this new update separately. So you have time to see how things will look and behave in your own layout. So if you want to do an official validation, like you're planning to go to 724, but you need to validate it first, we always help people out with that because we know how important it is to validate your data. If you have any questions, problems, if you need another demo or you just want to look through the software with your layouts and you need some help with that, please reach out to us at support@denovosoftware.com. There's 7 tech specialists. We are in 5 different time zones, so there's pretty much somebody always working when you need help. And with that, if anybody else has any more questions, we'd be happy to take those. All right. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email us. Email us and ask any questions, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So thanks everybody for coming.